There is kind of like I guess a work stigma behind it. Like some people, a lot of people who are A-listers, celebrities, use ghostwriters because like honestly, they really don't have the time to write a book. And so they just hire somebody to write their book. And some A-list celebrities will say, like, yes, I had a ghostwriter. And some A-list celebrities won't say if they did or not, but I can guarantee you probably almost all of them did. And there's nothing wrong with hiring a ghostwriter. Like I liken it to like, okay, so if your house needs a new water heater, right? And somebody comes over and fixes it, it's your house. You just have somebody come over and do a service that you either don't know how to do or don't want to do, and you're paying them for it. It's the same thing with ghostwriting, right? So you're paying somebody to write content for you, but they're not putting their name on it. So like if I write blogs for somebody and I don't put my name on it, that actually is ghostwriting as well. So a lot of copywriters do ghostwriting in the format of like blogs or articles for people. But what most people think of ghostwriting as typically is ghostwriting in the form of like somebody's writing their book, but they don't have their name on the cover.
Welcome to another episode of the Health Coach Academy podcast. I'm your host, Omar Cumberbatch of OmarCumberbatch.com. Happy New Year. So excited to share another year with this audience. It's so exciting to just start a new year off. And honestly, it's my favorite time of year. It's my favorite holiday. Really one of those things where it just wraps your mind around all the possibilities of what's to come. And I think that last year, actually, I set out a bunch of New Year's resolutions that I think I accomplished most. What was interesting is that I did want to become an author. I did put out a food journal. It's called This Food Journal Burns Fat, which is a supplemental part of this podcast, Burns Fat, with my host, Dr. Lori Shemick. But I'm not even sure if that's technically an authorship. Yes, it's a book. Yes, I put it together. Yes, it's on Amazon. Yes, it was self-published. But it's just a food journal, and I don't want to belittle that by any stretch of the imagination because there was some effort. But I think there's a big difference, I think, from a food journal and a potential big-time book. And I'm so excited to share today's guest, Lynn Smargis, and she is a ghostwriter. And I know ghostwriters get a little bit of a bad rap. Oh, I shouldn't even say the ghostwriters themselves. I would think that the person who possibly uses a ghostwriter might have a little bit of a stigma to that method of putting together a book. And that's something that I think that after you hear this episode, you're going to say, wow, I will definitely consider that, because it's one of those things that I think we can use, especially when it comes to repurposing content. This was a phenomenal show. I think that you guys are going to love Lynn. So I'm going to just jump into it. But also, of course, let me just get some of this housekeeping out of the way. Speaking of the New Year's resolution, last New Year's, I was saying that I was going to get my podcast course out. And of course, it is out. And it's something that I'm really proud of. So, you know, if you know anyone who's ever interested in taking a course about making a podcast and how to boost your health coaching business, give it a check out at OmarCumberbatch.com. You get to see it over there. And yeah, just give me a rating and review. As always, that helps get great guests like Lynn on the show. So thank you again for another wonderful year, and I'm looking forward to sharing it with you guys, and I hope the best and most prosperous 2024 for all of you listening. And thanks again for supporting the show. Let's jump into it. Hey, Lynn, how are you today? Welcome to the show.
Good. Thanks, Omar. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to have you. You have so much to offer. You are completely a new topic for us today, because we definitely have not had any ghostwriters on the show, but you know, your company, Right For You, does many things. So I want to give you at least a little bit of an opportunity to talk about who you are, what your company does, and then I'm going to jump into a whole bunch of selfish questions, because your service is really inspiring for what I do, and I know a lot of the health coaches out there right now are interested in the same type of thing. So yeah, that's what I think we're going to focus this episode on, but I definitely want to give you a chance to just shout out, you know, Right For You and just a little bit about yourself.
Well, thanks. I appreciate it. Yeah. So, Write for You is my company, and it started out as a travel writing company, and then I had to switch pivot during the pandemic and got into content marketing, and then pivoted once again, like niche down into ghostwriting. Because one of the things that I found was that ghostwriting is really my favorite thing to do. Like I love to help people tell their story, and a lot of writers actually aren't a fan of ghostwriting. So it's just because you're a writer doesn't mean that necessarily that they do ghostwriting, because that's a very special niche within writing itself. So what I help my clients with is people will come to me and they'll either have an idea for a book, or they'll have a podcast and they want to turn their podcast into a book. And I can either do book coaching and help them write their book with them, or if they just have a bunch of content and they know their table of content, like their outline they want to do, I can take their outline and take their content and then transcribe it and then turn it into a book for them.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. You brought up, like, I guess a little bit of the stigma. So is ghostwriting? I always thought of it like maybe copywriting on steroids. So people use copywriters all the time, but there is a little bit of a stigma behind the concept of ghostwriting. Is that accurate? And if so, why?
Yeah, there is kind of like a I guess a work stigma behind it. Like some people, a lot of people who are A-listers, celebrities, use ghostwriters because like honestly, they really don't have the time to write a book. And so they just hire somebody to write their book. And some A-list celebrities will say, like, yes, I had a ghostwriter. And some A-list celebrities won't say if they did or not, but I can guarantee you probably almost all of them did. And there's nothing wrong with hiring a ghostwriter. Like I liken it to like, okay, so if your house needs a new water heater, right? And somebody comes over and fixes it, it's your house. You just have somebody come over and do a service that you either don't know how to do or don't want to do, and you're paying them for it. It's the same thing with ghostwriting, right? So you're paying somebody to write content for you, but they're not putting their name on it. So like if I write blogs for somebody and I don't put my name on it, that actually is ghostwriting as well. So a lot of copywriters do ghostwriting in the format of like blogs or articles for people. But what most people think of ghostwriting as typically is ghostwriting in the form of like somebody's writing their book, but they don't have their name on the cover.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting because, like I said, I guess everyone wants to make claim to the book, but like you mentioned earlier, there's an artistic appreciation that at least I have of what you do, because you are taking what they've done and sometimes just arrange it in a way that makes it presentable in a book form. And that's something that's specific to the way that you operate. So talk about that a little bit, because I do want to just knock that stigma off of ghostwriting, because I really, especially as many copywriters who I deal with now on a regular basis, it's this exact same thing. And I don't like shy away from someone who makes a lead magnet for me, or if I get someone to do my show notes, it's all the same. It's kind of just bizarre.
Right. Yeah, it is the same, but it's funny that people have this thing with books, because I guess because books are so well known, and I guess people, if they see someone's name on a book, they expect that person to write it. But getting back to your question, it's like, yeah, you can literally have anybody write for you. And then what was your question again, Omar? The last question you asked me, I just completely blanked.
No, I was just kind of alluding to the fact that it's just basically the same as anything else that we do, and it's just just very odd that it's such a interesting spin that people take it so negatively.
Yeah, no, it is. I
Out.
totally agree with you. It's really funny because like another really odd thing that I've encountered too is I wear glasses clearly because I have glasses on, but I also wear hearing aids. But like no one has a problem with wearing eyeglasses. But then when it comes to hearing aids, people are like, oh my gosh, like I don't want to tell anybody I have hearing aids. It's like, you need to hear. Like, I'm sorry, for me, hearing is a requirement. So I wear hearing aids. And so it doesn't bother me at all. Like I'll tell people, oh, I'm reading, if I look like I'm staring at you, it's because I'm reading your lips because I wear hearing aids and I don't hear that well. And like, I don't have a problem with it. And I feel like if somebody else has a problem with it, then they clearly don't need to be in my circle of friends, because it wasn't my choice to not have hearing.
Right. So yeah, I guess today we're going to normalize ghostwriting at some point.
Yes.
After this, for sure. One of the things that I found fascinating too is your methodology behind it. So can you talk about a little bit about how you actually turn people's existing content into a book?
Yeah. So most people will, when they want to have a book written, they don't usually understand the process of it. And I wouldn't expect them to, because they've never written a book. Like they think like, oh, I give them the content and then it's a book. Well, you have to actually do a lot of back and forth. So when I work with somebody, typically what I do is I do my book coaching. So and typically most of my clients pick 7 hours per month. where we'll sit down for initial conversation and we'll make an outline or a mind map or something, some type of organization on what their chapters are going to be of their book. And of course, with a book, because you're going back and forth, it's a process like podcasting or anything else. So things are going to change along the way. You might change where the chapter is. You might change the title chapter. You might take a whole entire chapter out. Whatever you do is perfectly fine. People just have to remember it's a process and not to get hung up on like, oh, I need my title first thing, or this has to be perfect first time around. So I help them. I start with them with just organizing with a mind map. And then once we get that mind map done, they have a couple different options on how to get their content to me. So some people will actually just audio record, and then I take their audio recording and then I transcribe it. And then I take that transcription and write it in their voice and style for their book. Or other people will like type it out, or they have a book that they've started. So they'll send me that content, or they'll have podcast episodes that fit in certain chapters. So they'll send me that and I'll transcribe it. But one of the important things that I always help clients with is, because I'm a writer and I write between 2,000 and 8,000 words a day. So I love writing and I can get it done really quickly. But a lot of my clients, that is not their expertise. And that's why they're hiring me, is to get their book done in a certain time frame that is professional and, grammatically correct, organized well, and in their voice and style. So once they hand that content to me, I do my best job in writing in their voice and style, so that when they do publish their book and people read their website or they call them, there's not going to be a disconnect between the book style and voice and when they're talking to somebody on the other end of the phone line.
Yeah, so like someone provides you with so I'm just, again, it's kind of selfish question, but I'm just using me as an example because it's kind of an easy segue into the question. Yeah, we're probably closing in on 200 episodes of podcasts. Like what happens in that circumstance? Like you say, okay, as you get the outline, you start saying, okay, this is what we'll get these episodes to start deciphering what our message we're going to convey. I'm assuming you're not going to listen to all 200 episodes and stuff.
Right.
Like, I'm just curious about like that, because I know, health coaches who listen, they have their own podcasts, and it's always been something that they want as well to convert their existing material into a book. So I'm curious about that method.
Right.
Podcast as an example.
Yeah, well, first of all, having a book is a great way to distinguish yourself from other people, because like 85% of people say they want to write a book, and out of that out of all the people that want to write a book, 85% never even start. So you having a published book really puts you like on the cream of the crop, because it distinguishes you from everybody else, because you're at that like 2% of people who actually have a published book. And so a lot of people write a book but never publish it. And so that really distinguishes you having a written book. But with the podcasting, I actually turned my podcast, Travel Gluten Free, into a book, The Guide to Traveling Gluten Free. And how I did it was I made my mind map of all the chapters I wanted to do. And then I found some podcast episodes that fit into those chapters. And where they fit, I would use the podcast episode. And then I would have to write some more and fill in the blank. And then there's some chapters I didn't have any episodes for. And so I had to write those myself. Another thing one of my clients started doing was that we did her mind map, so we knew what was going to be in her book. And so what she started doing was actually making podcasts of those chapters, so that she was actually making her book, repurposing her content, making her podcast, and then taking that content, which was specifically for a specific chapter, and putting it in her book. So you could do it either way. So even if you have a podcast, you have 200 episodes and you write an outline, if there's chapters you can do an episode on, and like repurpose your content, you can do that. But even when you do that, just know that you always do still have to like fill in with some write your own writing. Like it's not just like a copy and paste. That's what's known in writers' world as a blog book. And those are not good reads, because they're too choppy and they don't flow well, because people just literally copied and pasted information and made it a book.
Gotcha. So yeah, podcasting is not the only way that you do your ghostwriting. You take it even off social media and other forums as well. Can you talk about the other different aspects that you can use that you could get a book out of?
Yeah, social media is really hard because it's too small of a snippet, but like video content is great, because you can take a video, download the audio and transcribe it, or podcasting is really great. And then another thing I've had clients do too is for those fill-in chapters, like one of my clients, she, when she's waiting in line to pick up her daughter for 45 minutes, she gets on her phone and audio records like the next information that she's writing her book about. So just like, if you have an outline, right, and you just start audio recording in those times of the day, you find that you're by yourself. Like waiting in line for your kids at their school is perfect because there's no one to bother you. You're in your car by yourself, unless you have a toddler or a little one in the back. But it's a pretty great time to do it because there's a 99% chance that your toddler in the back is asleep. So you can sit there and record and not have anybody bother you. But you do want to have record from an outline that's in your phone.
Gotcha. So one of the things that I was curious about too is like, why is it important for us to use our existing content as opposed to just starting from scratch? Just say, hey, Lynn, write me a book, knock yourself out. What's the advantage to that?
So the one advantage, you can do it either way. So either way, you can have an excellent like professional book that is self-published. But the advantage to having the content is if you already have the content, that kind of saves you some time because as long as your content fits in your book. So even if you're writing like a book, like when I wrote my guide to traveling free, my guide to traveling gluten free, I think I only had like 85 or 100 episodes. And so there were some episodes that fit really well. Like I did a whole series on national parks, so that fit perfectly in my national parks chapters. But then there were some episodes I couldn't use at all because they just clearly didn't fit in my book. So that's one thing I warn people about is like, don't try to fit things in your book that don't belong because when readers are reading your book, they will be able to tell and it's not going to sound good.
Mm-hmm. And as far as like people recognizing your actual voice, right? So like one of the things that I thought too is the reason that you probably would prefer to go in that direction is because if you do have any somewhat of a fan base of just people who are listening to you, they know what you're about. There is definitely a disconnect if you just come in and just start saying something randomly about whatever topic. So that does come into play as well when you're using your existing content.
Yeah. So one of the things I tell all my clients is like, if don't force your content into your book. You really need to start with your outline because some people are like, oh, I'll just take my content and make it into a book, but it doesn't work. So you need to start with your outline because you need to know like what topic you're doing, what subtopic you're doing. And it might be like a niche of your niche too. And so you have to take that into consideration. So while you don't have to know your book title, you have to know who you're talking to and what your niche topic is going to be on your book. And you also want to go on Amazon and see who else has written those types of books and what titles and niches they've done. And you want to do something that's a little bit different. So you don't want to do like if somebody did like how to use Buddhist practice in your small business, you could do how to use Buddhist practice if you're a health coach, right? So that's a niche of a small business. And so that's perfectly fine as long as it's not the same topic as somebody else. But that's one of the other things you need to do too. Just like when you're doing a podcast and you're researching to find out what type of niche podcast you want to do, you also want to do that with your book on Amazon because most people are selling their books through Amazon.
Yeah, that's interesting. So can you dive into a little bit about that market research? Do you provide that as well to help out your clients?
Yeah. So if my clients want to hire me to do that in addition to writing their book, I can do that as well. So we can start from with market research and like jump on a Zoom call and go on Amazon together and just talk through it. Because a lot of times that's just what people need, like, because they have an idea in their head, but they're not sure how to fine tune it. So I can talk people through that and walk them through that journey of fine tuning, like, who is it you really want to speak to and why do you want to write this book? And then niching it down from there. And so getting that topic, that niche, and that avatar that they're speaking to so that they have a really clear focus on what they're doing when they're writing a book. Because there's no worse book to read than a book that has been thrown together with no focus and it's all over the place. And yeah, it's horrible. And you don't want to, honestly, you don't want to spend all that time and effort to put out a book like that either, because that's going to just ruin your reputation or make you look bad at a minimum, right? Like, because people are like, what is this? Like, this is horrible. Like, and so, yeah, so you just want to be organized so it looks professional and it's formatted correctly and all that good stuff.
Yeah, no, I'm glad that you brought all these things up because again, you do all of this and it's really impressive. And I wanted to kind of dive into just the difference to like, all right, once you're done, you help your client out, they have their book. How do you tell them which route to go, about the self-publishing route or the actual traditional publishing? Do you get involved in that at all as well?
Oh, yeah, I get that question all the time. And so typically, what I tell people is if this is your first book, I highly, highly recommend self publishing. And there's a few reasons for that. One is because a lot of people think a traditional publisher is going to do a lot of your marketing for you, and they actually don't. Traditional publishers will give you like a budget for marketing, but then you have to do all of the footwork yourself. And the joke in the writing community is it's like once you've written your book, you finished writing your book, and now you have the actual job of marketing your book, which goes on forever and ever. So the only reason to really go with a publisher is if you want that notoriety, I guess, or you want someone else helping you. But the other problem that I've seen with publishers too is that, and this is not all publishers, but quite a few traditional publishers, is that they'll take somebody's book and they'll edit it to the point where it's not in their voice and style anymore. Like I had a friend of a friend, and she got her book back and she said she cried because it didn't even sound like her anymore. And she had to publish it because you're going with a traditional publisher. The other thing is that a lot of traditional publishers, it won't even look at you if you don't have a published book. And the other thing is I think that even if you want to go with a traditional publisher in the long run, going through that self-publishing process yourself is really good, because then you know everything, you know how to do it. And so then when you go to a publisher, you have that knowledge, and we all know that knowledge is power, right? Like, so if they try to pull one over on you, like one of the things traditional publishers typically do is they try to take your rights for audiobook in your contract. And so I always warn my friends, like, if you're going with a traditional publisher, have a lawyer read the contract to make sure that you have your audiobook rights. So that's one thing that traditional publishers typically try to get, because they know they'll make a lot of money off the audiobooks.
Yeah, that's interesting that you brought up the audiobook. I didn't realize that they own that. And can you talk about that a little bit more too? Because I think that's an important aspect that a lot of people go into it thinking they have no idea that that's actually a part of the situation at all.
Yeah. So wrapped into that too is the Amazon ISBN. So some people are like, oh, Amazon gives you a free ISBN. But remember, free is never free. So with the Amazon ISBN, if you don't buy your own ISBNs and you go with Amazon's free one, yes, you can sell on Amazon, but that's literally the only place you can sell it. So if you have a book with an Amazon ISBN, you can't even buy your own book and sell it like at a expo or a conference or sell it to your friends. Like you can only sell it through the Amazon platform because you're using their ISBN. So what I tell everybody is you have to go on this website. It's called myidentifiers.com. And you don't want to buy one ISBN. You want to buy the 10 pack, because even though it's a little bit more, it's totally worth it, because you need one ISBN for each type of book. So you need one for your print book, one for your ebook, one for your audiobook. So if you buy one, it's like I think $150, but if you buy a 10 pack, it's like $250 or something. So it totally makes sense, especially if you plan on doing more than one format of your book, which most people do, to buy the 10 pack. And so that's the way to go, because then you own your ISBN, and then you can buy copies of your book. Like I have copies of my book in my house, and then I get either I sell them to people, or if I want to go to a conference and sell them, I can do that too, because it's my ISBN. So I own the ISBN and on the book. If you are on Amazon and you have it under the Amazon ISBN, the only way that I know of to get out of that is to make a second edition of your book and publish it with your own ISBN. But that requires like going in and rewriting your book. Like you can't just add a paragraph. You have to actually rewrite I think it's either 20 or 30% of your book has to be different for it to be considered a second edition.
Really, that's fascinating. So like I couldn't take my book that I have on Amazon and then go to Barnes and Nobles and say, can I put it in your store? I mean, so that's a completely different thing.
So not within a free Amazon ISBN, but if you buy your ISBN from my identifiers, then yes, you can do that. The only problem with selling to bookstores, because a lot of people want to do that, is this. So if the bookstore agrees to buy 20 copies of your book and then 15 copies don't sell, then you have to pay them. So they get whatever commission on the 5 books that they sold, but then you have to pay them to buy back your 15 books and pay to ship it back to you, or pay to have it destroyed. So it's really not worth it selling to a bookstore unless it's like a little local community bookstore and you don't have to buy your books back.
That's interesting because it's funny because my father is in the record industry, and he used to always just talk about, at least with records, that never was a situation. So it's like if Michael Jackson had a hit record, well, I shouldn't say a hit record. a dud. The stores bought the records. It's like kind of was on them back in the day, at least. So that's changed or maybe not changed for the books, but that's totally different for books.
Yeah, that's completely different for books. And of course, like it sounds sexy, right? Like, oh, I've got my book in this bookstore. And airport bookstores are even harder to get into. And that's a whole nother story. But yeah, and because I was looking into getting my book because it's a guide to traveling gluten-free, because clearly people are traveling in airports. But yeah, it's like practically impossible to get your book in a in a bookstore in the airport. And you pay like this huge upfront fee just to get it in there. So basically people who have their books in airports, it's just to say like, hey, my book is in this airport, and they're really not making much money off of it, unless we're probably like an A-lister.
Wow, this is all good stuff. And I guess one of the final questions I'll ask about just that process as well. Does the Kindle store have anything else to do with anything? Because I know Amazon and Kindle have some relationship as far as I understand. And when you upload it to, I guess that Kindle service publishes it on demand. Does that have anything to do with the distribution as well?
Yeah, so Kindle is a part of Amazon. So Amazon bought them out years ago. And so Kindle is now a part of Amazon. And so when you publish your book, if you only publish an ebook and you publish it through Amazon, it gets published through Kindle. And then if you publish your paperback book, Amazon does the print on demand for your paperback book. So you can order 1 copy, you can order 10 copies, you can order 1,000 copies. And the benefit to the print on demand is that you don't have to keep a whole bunch of copies of your book in your house. And that's also one of the things publishers will do. They require you to buy like 1,000 copies of your book. So if you only sell 500, you've got 500 books in your house just sitting in boxes, which is not convenient whatsoever, as you can imagine. So yeah, so I always tell people just go with the self-publishing route for at least your first book.
No, absolutely. Yeah, no, this has been a fascinating conversation. I thank you for sharing all this information. So I just want to give you another opportunity to kind of just talk about Write For You as well, how to get in touch with you, all your social media handles, your website, of course, and, other services that you offer. Because again, we just touched on that this particular part of your business, and I know there's a lot more to it. So I just want to give you an opportunity to talk about it now.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Somar. So in my business is Write For You, and you can visit me on the web at WRITEFORYOU.me. So .me. And then you can reach out to me via email, lynn@writeforyou.me. So it's LYNN at writeforyou.me. And then you can find me on my podcast, Your Writing Coach. So you can download that. I've got 2 seasons of that out, and I talk about marketing and ghostwriting on that podcast. And then you can also reach out to me via my cell, which is 435-659-6587. And we can set up a discovery call. It's just complimentary, where we sit down and find out like what you need and what I can offer to you, and if we're a good fit. And so my primary thing is ghostwriting, but I can also help you with like lead magnets, blogs, any type of content marketing that you need, that you just want to get off your plate because it's been sitting there for a year.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for being on the show, and really fascinating stuff. So have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, Omar. You too.
Hope you enjoyed listening to today's episode of the Health Coach Academy podcast. If you did, jump over to iTunes and leave a rating and or review. It goes a long way in helping get this message out to our fellow health coaches and people in our industry. Also, if you can, jump over to my website, omarcumberbatch.com, where I give out a lot of freebies, including my 5-day sugar challenge for people who are having issues with sugar. And also for health coaches, I have the book, Hidden. It's the 6 not so obvious ways to get your clients unstuck. Have a great day.